Hi everyone, my name's Alex Clancy. I'm the Digital Enablement Manager for Eastern Broadacre, based in Wagga Wagga, working for Bayer Crop Science, and part of the field team that's working on FieldView and has been working on FieldView for the last couple of years. I'm joined here today with my counterpart, Julia Payne. So Julia and I share a job role, but Julia is based over in Perth and covers WA and South Australia, while I cover the eastern states for FieldView. Today we thought it might be a good idea to put together a bit of a webinar coming up to our 2025 season, what things might we want to look at in FieldView in terms of our planning, but also some pre-seeding information that might be handy to have available to everyone. Just to make sure we're getting the best out of FieldView and the best out of the 2025 season and the data that we've all worked so hard to collect over the last few years, or are just starting that journey on collecting this year. So today, what we thought we would do is go through a few different topics. We'll start off with just going through a few key things. What's the value of FieldView? What is the value particularly of FieldView at our seeding time? And then some more practical things. So we'll demonstrate how we might be utilising the web portal for our FieldView use. And then I guess going from there, what then we might want to be doing on our iPads, both within the FieldView Cab App and in the FieldView or the Climate FieldView app, also known as the Black and Gold app. We'll also give you some resources to look at as well. So links to where you might be able to find our knowledge centre, which has a heap of information or further information in there about certain things you might be looking at doing in FieldView, or looking for some more step-by-step guides on, as well as the contact details for our support team if you need someone that you'd like to talk to, or have some hands-on help with some data or setups as well. So just briefly, a lot of you might be familiar with FieldView, using FieldView already, but FieldView really is about three key things. So it's about staying connected on farm, monitoring your fields and collaborating with your advisors and making more informed decisions. So for many of you, staying connected on your farm, we really think about the mixed fleet, the connection to the cloud, that ability to have visibility into what's happening on your operation, sort of no matter the tasks you're completing or the color of the machine that you're in as well. Monitoring your fields is also a nice piece to FieldView, combining the data that we're pulling in through our field activities and starting to bring in other data layers, things like our field health imagery or our weather data, helping us to sort of piece the puzzle together of what that field activity data and what those other data sets might be able to give us. And ultimately using that data both from our own farms, but also from those external sources, both through the season and at the end of the season, to basically assess the decisions that we made during the season, but also anything that might have affected both good and bad our cropping season for that year as well. So in particular, we thought it might be a good time to explain or show some value that FieldView has at seeding time. So a big part of what our customers are using FieldView currently for at seeding is basically being able to keep track of seeding as it's going, at any time and from anywhere. So that connection with the iPad in the cab as it's going, as it's seeding, being able to remote view into that cab to see what's happening, whether you're in the office, in the ute, in town. Some people might even be overseas if they're lucky. Is really valuable to have that visibility. The other thing too, and we're seeing more and more of this, is variable rate applications of seeding and fertilizer. So when we have that happening, we're wanting to make sure that our machine is responding to those variable rate prescriptions that we're putting in, and seeing how the machine is performing over the different zones we might have set up before the season has started, or during the season for that matter. One of the things we've actually looked at too is a lot of use cases between a seeder and a sprayer wanting to know where each other is at various times during seeding. I guess more importantly, that's occurring at night where things are less visible in the field. But what we're seeing is, when we're having a sprayer running, just in front of a seeder, that seeder driver being able to get sort of an up-to-date application map of where that sprayer has been, and making sure they're not going any further ahead of where that sprayer is too. Other secondary metrics that we're trying to log, or we can log with FieldView, is things like our total applied, so our total seed that's going out in the ground. It might be our fertilizer that's going down the tube as well, and things like our machine metrics. So it could be, our fuel usage, the speed in which our machines are operating, those sorts of things, which we might actually use at a later point to kind of assess either how things are going or what might have affected certain performance, but also catch any issues that might be happening in the field if we're not seeing them necessarily from the cab. It's also really handy as well to give our agronomic partners, I guess, the visibility into how our seeding program is going. We know that there's a bit of a partnership that happens at these critical times, and everyone's trying to keep up to date where things are at, and with the ability to share your operation with your agronomist, or equally from an agronomist point of view, being able to have that visibility into where your grower has progressed to in terms of seeding, is a much more efficient way of doing that, rather than, I guess, either the phone call or running out to the field and seeing exactly where everyone might be up to. We also find that having seeding data is really handy in FieldView as a starting point. So we know if we get seeding right, we have all of our fields, our varieties, our hybrids or varieties or hybrids, our crop types, all of those things in place from seeding. Then we know from that point going forward, any applications we're doing, any activities that's happening on that field up until that harvest point is being attributed to that crop variety or hybrid. So before I get into some more practical things, I'm going to start with the web side and go through what we could do on the computer prior to sort of getting in front of the iPad. But I did want to point out that we do have a support team available in Australia. They're accessible by both phone and email. And we also have quite a thorough knowledge center, so a database on our webpage where you can search keywords, find some step-by-step guides, and try and navigate some of the key processes that you might be wanting to go through in your FieldView account. Jules, did you want to add anything about some of the things you've seen around the seeding time, or how growers are using FieldView to start their season?
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples, but the main one that sticks with me a fair bit is a grower. We sort of had a lunch with some different growers, and we brought them in and they were telling us about how they were using FieldView, and one of their operators had never sat in a seeding machine before. It was his first season, and they had two different seeders operating in the same paddock, and FieldView was running in the background. And after a couple of hectares, he looked over at his iPad and realized that his map was a different color to the other machine, and he sort of thought, oh, that's a bit strange, like why is it a different color? And they realized that he was seeding at half the seeding rate that he was meant to be at. So it's not really the purpose of what FieldView is, but I thought that was a good example of how it can be used as a troubleshooting purpose, and also I guess some of those like accidental trials to see whether maybe you could see if there's a difference at the end of the season. But they found value in that because obviously they were able to pick that up as an issue and fix that before he'd gone and finished the whole tank and realized that he's probably not covered this right amount of hectares that he should have.
No, it's a great example, and an example of where the initial reason why someone is using FieldView isn't necessarily the most value that they're getting out of it in terms of that point. So no, that's a great example. Okay, so from fieldview.com.au, that's going to be your first port of call. We're always going to go ahead and hit that login button. That's going to open up another pop-up. If we haven't logged in a while, or this is the first time logging in on a certain computer, it will ask us for login credentials, in which case you'll have to enter those. But for the most part, FieldView is pretty good, or Google Chrome as our preferred browser is pretty good at remembering your credentials and should log you straight in. I'll just in here put my login details, and that should keep me logged in. So once your account loads, it'll immediately drop you into the Fields tab. You'll see these little icons sitting around. I've got fields all around the place, but it should zoom into where the majority of your field boundaries already exist. Otherwise, on the left-hand side there, you'll see where your fields list is as well. Up the top, you'll see we've landed on that fields page, but equally, we have a few other pages which we will come back to, but just so you know where they are, we've got our prescriptions page, our reports page, we have our data inbox, and our new connect page as well. And that's where we're going to navigate to each of those different ones as we need them. The other thing that I thought I might point out is up in this top right-hand corner here, we have our settings page, settings drop down, and that's going to give us some other important things, mainly around managing our account and managing some of the data within our account as well. There's also a little shortcut here too. If we hit the help button, we can also see there's a knowledge center drop down. If we click that one there, that'll pop open our library, and from there, that's where you can search some of those keywords if you're looking for some step-by-step guides on pretty much any of the things I'm going to show you here today, but equally a lot more available in there as well. First things first, I thought one of the important things that we like to get right before we start a season is making sure our boundaries are all in order and nice and clean and ready for someone to go in when they're starting to collect data. The reason that can be is if we don't have those right, oftentimes we can see data falling outside of a boundary or going into a multitude of boundaries all kind of similarly named. So you can see here I've run into a bit of an issue where I've got two basically field ones. One's called F1, but one's called field 1. So I'm going to want to fix a problem like that before I start the season. Pretty simple and straightforward. Down this bottom left-hand corner, you'll see Manage Fields, and all I'm going to hit is that. I'm going to select my F1 and my field 1, knowing that they're one field and not two, and I'm just going to hit Merge. And it's going to step me through this process and show me exactly what it's going to do, but the action I'm going to choose is I'm just going to combine these boundaries, and I know that the field 1 is the boundary that I want to select because that one incorporates that whole field, and I'm just going to hit save on that. And what that's going to do is any data that might be sitting in both of those boundaries, we know that it's all part of one field, and we're going to combine that all into one now. Equally, and Jules, you might be able to speak to this as well, but we also find sometimes people pull out fence lines, and if that is the case, this would be a good process to go ahead and merge fields together rather than delete them. And in doing so, when you do that, you're actually preserving all of that data that you had in those fields, even though they were separate, and you're combining it into one now. So fairly simple and straightforward, and preserves all of your data. We try not to delete fields or delete much data if we can help it. If we can merge things and preserve it, that's what we're going to aim to do. Also in here, there's the ability to change any names. So you'll see next to any of these fields, we've got a little edit icon, and we can go in there, and if we need to change the name of a field, we can go in there and change the field or the client or the farm name. And also a good spot here if we need to adjust slightly how our boundaries are sitting, straighten them up, where they might have mapped around some activity data and not been as accurate. So an easy place to go in there and fix them up as well. So The only other thing that we might be doing with our boundaries is adding some. So I can tell you this part here is part of this same farm. I don't currently have a boundary in place for it there. And so I'm still in my edit fields tab. I can just hit add field, give it a name, and I'll call it field 7. Select the farm and the client name. And then up here on the draw button, I'm just going to do a simple polygon, and I'm just going to select those 4 corners of that field and click on the first drop pin to save that polygon, and then just hit save. And now that field's been added to my fields list. FieldView does its thing in the background, starts pulling all of that field health imagery from previous years, and I can start to add data quite simply and easily from the field if I'm going out in the cab. If you've got field boundaries that might be sitting in another program, one of the things we can do instead of going through and drawing all of these individually is, depending on where they are, they might be in your cab, they might be in another platform. If you can get those exported out into a shapefile, then what you can do is you can actually just come over to this part here, which is data inbox. If you select that, that'll open up the portal, which has just been renewed. And once that loads, what you should be able to do is either drag and drop any of your files in here or hit the browse files. Now, there are some steps on the left-hand side here on how to prepare that file in order to get it into FieldView. But simply what it's asking you to do is basically get all of those shapefiles into one folder and just basically zip it. So if I go into my file explorer here now, which you might not be able to see in my shared screen, but once I pick that up, should be able to drag that zipped file.
And Alex, like you were saying before, once you load those new boundaries into the account, it takes maybe an hour or a couple of hours, and you get all of the 3 years backdated field health imagery too for those fields, which can come in handy to compare to this year's field health imagery.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so pretty handy stuff, and some pretty great data that you can get quickly out of FieldView even prior to getting the tractor out in the field. So I've just dragged and dropped that zip file in. You can see it's giving me a status bar. Once that's completed, you'll see this view data files button up here will turn blue, and I'll be able to go in there. I'll see what all the fields that have uploaded in there, double check that they're exactly the ones that I wanted, or I've got them all, and just be able to confirm that. And all of those should go into your FieldView account, and they should have those farm field and client names attached to them as well. So just reducing a couple steps rather than going through and drawing each of them manually. So moving on from fields, one of the things that might be good to set up in sort of this planning time or getting ready for seeding this year is basically sharing data between yourself and your agronomist, or anyone else for that matter that might be a partner in the farm. So thinking that I might want to share some of my fields or all of my operation with someone like Julia. All I'm going to do is head up here to the top right where I've got my settings button, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit sharing. Sharing is going to bring up all of the different possibilities for me to share my account or invite someone to share data with me. It's also going to have a couple other things in there about sharing between John Deere and class. But for the sake of sharing to an individual, I'm going to go ahead and hit the share button. I'm going to chuck in Julia's email, knowing that Julia has a FieldView account already. And once I have put her FieldView account email in there. I can either share my whole operation with Julia, or I can go ahead and just share an individual field. And for the sake of this, I will say I'm going to share field 1, and I'm also going to include the yield data that's going to come through with that as well. I'll hit review. It's going to show me exactly what I've allowed Julia to see and do, and then I'm going to hit share. And what that's going to do, that'll send an email through to Julia. She'll get an email to say that Alex has shared a field with her, and she'll be able to see that field both within her own web portal as well as on the Climate FieldView app as well.
And Alex, if your account is a paid subscription account and you've shared to me, I don't necessarily have to have a paid account. I could have a free account as an agronomist, for example, and then you could share to me and I get to see all of the field health imagery that relates to your fields that are in your account.
Yeah, that's right. So you're basically leveraging the FieldView Plus subscription on that field. And so to avoid any duplication there, that field 1 has FieldView Plus subscription assets applied to it, and therefore but obviously the grower or the subscription holder is going to have it, but equally their agronomist is going to have that same level of functionality too. So the other one that we've got too is we might be sharing with our agronomists, but equally we might be wanting to share our data between different platforms that we might currently be using. So this new tab up the top here, Beta Connect, well, Connect, it's still in our beta, but we are adding to it slowly over the next few months. But if we head over to that, what we'll see is a number of quite popular platforms out there that growers might be using in conjunction with FieldView, and how we might go about connecting our FieldView account and the data within our FieldView account with those platforms too. So you can see obviously a few big ones in here that we might want to tap the connect button with. That's probably, or most like in most of these cases, going to take us to our account on either the Swap Maps, Panorama, Ag Leader side, whatever it might be, and we do the connection from their side. The other one we've got, the other two we've got, I should say, are John Deere Operations Center and Class Connect. And these basically we start the connection from the FieldView side. So if I go ahead and hit the manage button there, it's going to take me back to my platform sharing page. And once that loads, it'll basically ask me to connect. And once I hit that connect, it'll ask me to enter the credentials for my John Deere Operations account, and then it'll be able to connect those two things together. Managing that connection can be done from either side, from the John Deere Connections portal side or from the FieldView side, but basically will mean that data can flow between those two platforms fairly seamlessly as well.
We have a few people using that connection, especially if they run mostly a John Deere fleet and they work in that environment, and then maybe they've got contractors or a few other pieces of machines that aren't connected to a John Deere screen, and FieldView collects that data and shares it back via the connection to John Deere. So I think a few people are getting some good value out of that.
Yeah, they're quite complementary to each other as well, and the operation side's quite valuable in terms of that machine management side of things. But FieldView does a really good job of basically pulling the field data and really looking at some of the agronomic tools that can go alongside of it. So the last thing I was going to go through today, which we might do on web in preparation for this season, is our prescriptions. So for some of you out there, you might be looking at doing some variable rate seeding rates in your field, or you might be looking at variable rates of fertilizer going down the tube at seeding as well, and or both for that matter. But there is a couple of different ways you might be looking at creating a prescription in order to do that. So I might just select one of my fields here, and the reason I say that is because FieldView has a couple of different ways of building the zones within a prescription. Some people might seek to use different data layers to basically determine what rates are going where. And so if I pick a field such as this one, I'll hit create new prescription and my cursor comes alive. It's going to come up initially with 3 options here. So you've got fertility, planting, and protection. For the most part, what this really is about is actually recording the type of prescription going out. It doesn't really have a determining effect on how that prescription is written. So I'm usually a fan of trying to use the fertility prescription writing tool for a majority of of tasks that I'm doing through the year. So the reason being is that fertility prescriptions are pretty much always going to be a kilograms per hectare or 8 litres per hectare prescription, and that's enough for me to be able to create it in FieldView and get it into the controller in the cab. So if I go through, I'll just select fertility. It's going to ask me a couple of different things. And again, this is mainly from a back-end record keeping point of view. It's less so, like I said, affecting the prescription itself. It's more so just how it names it and those sorts of things. So one of the things I might do is I might generate zones from a map layer. So this is taking field health imagery that I can basically select from the previous, whatever it is, Jules 3 or 4 years prior, that I think determines well my field zones. I might use something that I've received off my agronomist or another precision ag advisor about where those zones are. Or I might use one that I've developed previously. Equally, you can be as rudimentary as drawing your own, which in this case is what we will do. We'll go ahead and say it's an other timing. It's going to put a planned date out there. You can change that as you would like to. We might say we're doing, nitrogen. So it might be for the fertilizer going down the tube. We might just select something simple like urea. And that's why it's asking us that information, because that's how it's gonna write the prescription file name. Equally, I could change this and say that it is seed, but for this purpose, I'll leave it at urea, and I'm going to hit finish in editor. What that's going to do is that's going to bring up my field, show me where each of the zones are. At the moment, I've only got 1. So if I might want to determine based off a previous yield map. So if I go down here to the change map option, I've just selected a yield map in there. Now this field had a trial on it, as you can see on the left hand side there. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to draw. I'm going to hit polygon, and I might say that this area here that looks slightly different, I might know that that's a ridge, or it might be a flat in this area that could benefit from having a different rate put on it. And because I have selected a nitrogen fertilizer, it's going to ask me for the N rate in kilograms per hectare. So I'll say 40 for everything else, 60 for my zone, and that's going to be enough zones for me at this point, and I'm just going to hit save on that. It'll take me back to my fields prescriptions tab. It'll tell me the script was successfully made. It'll show me where those zones are. I can then go back into the prescription tool and use this same zoning to develop a seeding prescription. So I'll just go through, keep the zones where they are, and change it. If I'm doing wheat, it might be something like 60 kilos or 80 kilos of wheat in different zones. And so I'll have 2 there. And then all I'm going to do is hit that export the fertility script. I can send it directly to John Deere Operations Center, and that way it'll deploy into my John Deere machine. Or I can hit download, select the type of screen that you're using to control. So we might select something fairly common like TopCon. And once I do that, it's going to basically get that prescription, organize it, and put it in a file structure and folder structure in a certain way, put it in a zip file and download it. And all I'm going to do is grab that file, put it on a USB and put it into my TopCon screen, and away I should go. So that's prescriptions in the short. Like I said, I'll finish on the most important thing that I can probably communicate today, which is to find any of those steps that I've done today. All you're going to want to do is go up to the right-hand side here, hit Help, and hit Knowledge Center. And that's just going to take you to our Knowledge Center, which is going to have both contact details for our support team to help you along the way with any of that, but also any specific information or step-by-step guides that you want. You should just be able to search keywords and be able to find documents that are going to step you through those processes. So that's pretty much web from my side of things, or things to look at going into the planning and seeding season. But Jules is going to take over now and go through some of the things we might want to both check and get set up ready for seeding on our iPads.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I thought this would be a good opportunity to run through the difference between the two different apps. So we've got the FieldView Cab app, and we also have the Climate FieldView app. So firstly, I'm going to run through the FieldView Cab app, and this is the white icon with the cab. So basically, this is a pretty simple app to navigate around. The tiles are quite self-explanatory, but we'll run through them a little bit here on how to get yourself set up. But importantly, this FieldView Cab app connects to the FieldView Drive, which is the device that we have that plugs into the diagnostic port in a cab or via a harness to a different screen. So let's say, for example, it's that TopCon screen at seeding time. We've got a harness that goes into the back of the TopCon screen, and the FieldView Drive is picking up that rate and GPS message so that it can build maps in the cab app. And that works via a Bluetooth connection to the iPad. And then you set up that piece of equipment in here. So in terms of the compatibility side of things, if you are new to FieldView and you don't have machines set up, or you're looking to get more machines set up and you want to know what you need to get the FieldView Drive to be compatible, reach out to our 1-800 number or our FieldView Australia email address and contact our support team, and they'll be able to figure out what you're going to need to make that compatible. But I mean, Alex, I don't know about you, but I haven't really come across too many scenarios where we haven't been able to get someone connected somehow.
No, that's right. Yeah. So we really have, a swathe of compatibility that we're able to pull a lot of data from. And there is obviously certain situations where we do incompatible rate controllers, but equally in that same setup, we are pulling some pretty important data and some metrics from seeding.
Yeah. So I might just run through firstly a few things to think about with the Cab app. So when you're about to go in before the season, it's always a good idea to update your iPad iOS version. They're bringing those out quite often, as are we with our Cab app versions. So you can check that by going to the Help button and then version info. This will tell you I am currently on 13.3.2. So your app store will tell you whether you are on the latest one or whether you need to update. You could have it, some people have it on auto update so that it's doing that automatically for them. So it's always good to make sure, particularly if you've got multiple iPads running at the same time, that they are all on the same version, because it relies on the versions being the same for the best user experience. So another thing, you'll be logged into the same account, so you don't need a different account to log in. It's all one account. All machines will be logged into the same one as well. So there are a few settings to make sure that you've got right before the season as well. So firstly, on the home page, that little Cloud Sync icon in the bottom left is a really important icon. So this one, you can press that and tell it to start cloud syncing and update data. That's basically what we say, force cloud sync, and that's forcing the data from the iPad up to the cloud and back again to make sure that it's all syncing properly. But in settings, there's a few things to think about here. This cloud sync, which I was just talking about before, that means it's currently doing a cloud sync, but we want to make sure that that's on enabled, so that the white part is on enabled. If it's disabled and you're collecting data, none of that data will go to the cloud and you won't be able to see it. Another thing to check too is Cloud Sync fields. For people that have been using it for a little while, I think this is relatively new, and on some people's Cab app on their iPhones, it has been defaulting to on demand sometimes. I would suggest checking and just making sure it's on current season, because if it's on demand, it won't sync any of the data until you actually force that cloud sync to happen. So if you press current season, it'll automatically be cloud syncing that when the app is open. The other one to think about here is Cloud Sync Field Health Imagery. That's what the FHI stands for. I've got mine on enabled, so it means that my iPad will bring up all of the field health imagery layers. If you're having trouble with the speed of your iPad working, or you're in low reception areas, it might be a good idea to disable that. If the Cab app is not the place that you're looking at that field health imagery, you can look at that in the climate FieldView app instead, which might be better for your operation. Another couple things to keep an eye on is in the data tab. Down the bottom here, it shows what your available space is on your iPad. If you're reaching the top end here, probably wouldn't be a bad idea doing a bit of a cleanup of the iPad, because the closer you are to filling your storage, or the less storage you have available on your iPad, the more it's going to struggle, because the way the Cab app works is it stores current data actually on the iPad device, as well as pushing it to the cloud. So that's a bit of a difference between the FieldView Cab app and the Climate FieldView app, is it actually saves data on the device. Equally with that, if you only want to see your current season data, so if we were in 2024, we're in 2025 now, but if we were in 2024 and we didn't actually need any of the 2023 data, we could come up here and just clear that off the iPad to make sure, which I have done, because I don't need that saved on my iPad. It's in the cloud and I can bring it back anytime I want by rebuilding it, but I don't actually need it in there. There's a couple of settings and things to check. If you have any support questions, or something's not quite working during the season, under the help, this contact support page is where you can submit a ticket. So you can just put in like a fake phone number. I usually just tell people to put like 10 zeros or something in there, and just write a little description on what's going on. So maybe the FieldView drive has lost connectivity or something like that, and then you submit that ticket, and that will send the data from the current field that you're in to our support team, so that they can dig in the background and figure out what's going on. So those are a few things on the settings side of things that could be useful. When you're going to get set up for your machines to start mapping, you'll go to the equipment tab. This account is pretty fresh, so we haven't got any equipment in here yet. If we want to add a new piece of equipment, this is where there's a full list of all of the things that you could potentially connect to, and anything that's in here means that our FieldView drive is compatible with. If it's not in here, it doesn't necessarily mean we're not compatible with it. We might just have to set it up in a different way. That's why it's good to sort of contact our support team to see if you're compatible. We're going to set up a self-propelled sprayer, for example. Where this one, as an example, has got 5 sections, and just going to put these in to give an idea on.
I think one of the important things there, Jules, is the centimeters measurement too. So it does catch a lot of people out, but FieldView setups are in centimeters. So just keep that in mind, because I know a lot of us work in feet or meters in a lot of ways, but it is all in centimeters. So it is a common question when things aren't going right. We often see some 50 centimeter or 48 centimeter wide booms, which
the way that you know that that's happening is when you go to the map screen and you know that it's mapping something, and it's mapping a small amount of data, but you can't see your icon for your seeder, and you can't see like a strip, but it might say 0.1 hectare has been seeded, for example. That's a pretty good call to say, I think it's set up in meters, not centimeters. And as you can see, all the measurements are centimeters. So what the FieldView Cab App will do is it knows what model number I have put in here. So it takes what all of these measurements are from factory. So the important thing to note here is if you've moved your GPS, or you've put a third-party GPS on the roof and it's in a different spot to what it would have come out factory, just make sure you check these measurements to make sure they're right, especially if it's like a right offset on the GPS and it's not sitting in the middle. Your map won't be in the right spot if you haven't put these numbers in correctly. But under application setup, this is where you'll tell it what actually is the screen and what's controlling the rate in here too. So this one's a John Deere, but there's a whole list of different screens that you could potentially have for this model sprayer. So it just shows like the compatibility side of things. And if we go application A controller, we're running a John Deere Green Star. If you had a second controller, which might often be the case for a seeder, you might have two different controllers in your seeder, you could set a new one, but for this, it's just one. This is where you'll just reconfirm again how many sections. Like some people might be over 100 sections, probably like 36 meter boom. So make sure you put that in as centimeters. This one's 24 was the example, but make sure you put it in as centimeters, and you have the option here to choose even widths. So that's pretty simple. You only have to do it once you've set up that piece of equipment. It sits there in the account. Any person that connects to that FieldView Cab App goes in, they're in the same account. They can see all the machines that have been set up. So I'm not currently connected to a FieldView Drive right now, but if I was, I'd be going back to the home screen and then to the map screen, and you'd be starting to see here what's actually mapping now. So we can't see that because we're not connected to a FieldView Drive, but on the left-hand side, you would have all the panes over here that you'd select what is your application that you're actually putting out. For the season, a few things I would recommend would be, we sort of get this question all the time about if my agronomist, for example, is using AgWorld or a similar planning platform, how do they work together? Is there a connection? There is no current connection between AgWorld and FieldView, but if your recommendations, for example, are coming from your agro, one thing that you could do to set yourself up for success in FieldView to make sure that everything is matched up is actually assign what the crop, the variety, and the application tank mixes are that you're going to be putting out. Obviously, things change and products change, and you can change that later, but it's good to sort of prep it, especially because we all know you've got different operators in the cabs. You've got people that might not speak really good English. So if you're trying to translate that over a two-way or something, someone puts it uppercase spelling, someone puts it lowercase spelling, and you've got two different maps. So if you set it up beforehand and make it as easy as possible, you'll have a smooth run. But in here in the settings is where you can set up your variety. So I'll just give an example. If you were wanting to put in a wheat variety, for example, we might do interesting one, but there's just an example of what's popped up. We can select however many we want to put in there. However many you run for your whole farm, you could just put all those in there. Equally with the applications, I currently haven't set anything up in here, but we can add a new one. Let's say it might be a Matino application. So we're going in liquid. This is where it gives you the option, how many products do you want to put in and what is your rate. So we'll just do one as an example. We'll select it from the list and put in what our rate is. And then press done. And now we've saved our application here. From this point, once you've set up multiple different mixes, some people choose to name them. They might choose to name them, Alex, I think you've seen this before, the same name as their AgWorld Reco number, and that's how that they match them together. Others might say this is knockdown 1, knockdown 2. Others might say this is EPA, first fungicide, second fungicide, or the name of the product. However you want to name it is how you do it. But an important thing to note is the FieldView Cab app is always recording what year and what field it's in. So you don't need to name it field 1 application, because you'll use this same application for multiple different fields. Once you've set those up in the Fields tab, this is where it's really good to assign what's going to happen. So if we want to say this paddock in particular, we're going to put it in as Scepter wheat in 2025. The idea of that is that when you come in for your seeding, that option is already there to select from the list, because you've already assigned it and said that that should be the crop that's going in. Equally, you could add that same application tank mix, and that's there easy to select from the list when the operator goes into the paddock. So those are
probably good to note too, Julia, is that while we endeavour to keep a lot of those products, or most products, within both our crop variety and our application mix, we do know that there are some custom or bespoke applications that are happening out there, and there's always the option to put an other in there and just basically name it what you want. So in particular, it might be important for, say, different fertilizer blends that might be getting done, or manure spreads, or anything like that, which might not necessarily fit in sort of our national or global list, but you can just put it in there as a custom addition, and then that'll stay in your list to basically select from that point going forward as well.
Yeah, you don't have to contact us to put that in for you, although you can, if you want that in as a longer term addition to the product list, you can email support and they'll put that in the longer term list. So that is a bit of an overview on the Cab app. The only other thing that I will say that I missed is under the equipment tab, there's this little button up here with the magnifying glass. That's the remote view option, and you also have the ability to do that off a phone too. If you have a machine that is operating in your account at the time, they will appear here to be able to remote view in and see exactly what that machine's doing. And that has been proved to be really helpful for owners to know exactly where the machine is without having to call them up on a UHF or ring them up or anything, so they can just find out where they are.
Yeah, and that one's fairly internet dependent too. So it does require some decent 4G coverage in order for that to work, and that's on both ends. So you'll need to, wherever you're sitting, hopefully within Wi-Fi, you've got pretty good internet coverage. But we usually say 2 to 3 bars of 4G, and we're pretty well good to go in terms of remote view, and that'll give you, like Julia said, a live picture of what's actually happening in that cab, everything from rates to speeds to location. You'll basically see what that cab driver is seeing as well.
Yeah. If you feel so inclined to do so, you can also set up notifications for speed alerts and things like that too. I haven't seen too many people do that. I'm going to move quickly on to the Climate FieldView app. So that's the one that is the black and gold icon. This is available on all iOS and Android devices, so you don't necessarily have to have an iPad to run this. Phone or tablet or iPad, any will work. This is the overview page. This whole app, I really think, is about where maybe an owner of a farm will go to do their deeper analysis of their yield analysis, which paddocks performed better, which varieties were performing better, like how far am I through harvest. I want to look at my satellite imagery, want to dig in and do some field region reports where I've done some on-farm trials or something like that. That is where like an owner or an agronomist would do that from in this app. And if you are an agronomist, where it says 2 operations in the top corner, that is where you drop that list down and select whose operation you actually want to see. Do you want to only see one of your farmer? If you're an agronomist, you only want to see one of your farmer's operations, or you want to see multiple and get like a spread of the information across multiple different accounts in your region. So I won't go through everything on here, but a few things that might be useful is a lot of farmers use this yield analysis tile to just find out how are my different crops performing. It's not a great example here because I don't have lots of fields, but if you had multiple fields that were all planted as wheat, you'd be able to compare performances across those and drill down and get an idea on different varieties, seed treatments, dates harvested, different combines if you wanted to do that too. In the Fields tab down the bottom, really similar concept to the way that the FieldView Web operated that Alex went through before, but basically you can select into any field and dig into the information. So it'll land on your most recent satellite image that's come in. You can drop down to the year, the season that you've had data in. So this is an example of one that we were looking at before. This is where you can split your screen, and then on one side we might have done a trial, and I wanted to touch on this, and I think it's a good point to say it, is FieldView is a really great way of doing on-farm trials. If you are an agronomist that's wanting to get some validation of how a product is performing on a larger scale in the paddock, you could get your grower to go out and do, for this example, they did half the paddock as 2 different varieties of wheat and then wanted to determine what the result was. Equally, they can go out, if they've got their spreader or their sprayer and they're going out putting fertilizer and the FieldView drive is capturing that, if they change the rate within the paddock, even if they just turn it off for a little bit to see whether they want to put a check strip or up the rate or lower the rate, the FieldView drive is going to pick up that change in rate. So then you'll be able to analyze the results. And we've already over here created multiple field region reports, but if we select one of them, or you could just draw a new one, this is able to split out the yield result based on those 2 different varieties. And actually some of the new features, you can split it out based on different products that have been applied and even different rates. So if you had gone out and done different rates of fertilizer, it can split it into like rate categories and give you an average yield response from that. So it's a really great tool for on-farm trialing and seeing the results. So this is how it presents. So you know that for that whole square that was selected, how many hectares, and then the split of the area across the 2 different varieties and what the average yield was for those as well. And then equally, if they had an application in here, which they have, they've got a fertilizer blend, you could drill down a bit further into that. This just has area of applied versus not applied, and then the rates one would be coming for future applications. This is just some older data. You can equally save these reports and like text them out or email them out to whoever's relevant to. I think the only other thing that I wanted to touch on in here is the reports tab. So particularly contractors and people that do lots of applications and map those in FieldView, a lot of them are using this to just figure out, well, how much product did I actually put out? You can change what you want to look at and figure out, for contractors, for example, how much area had I covered that I need to invoice for and how much product did I use for that particular farm. So it can be really useful. And on the overview tab, there's a new tile here called Your Farm at a Glance. Basically, this just gives an overview. We've got 2024 wheat selected, so you could change which one you want to look at. And if this were your farm with multiple fields, you'd have a lot more data. But you'd have how to compare data from one year to another, and which one was your top performing fields, low performing fields, and varieties, etc. So yeah, lots more features coming this way that you'll be able to look at. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover on these apps, but I think one thing that I would say is if you're interested in, or you got questions about FieldView, or you want to talk to somebody, do reach out to the support team. More than happy to help. And like Alex and I are field-based roles, and we're happy to help where we can. But the 1-800 number and the FieldView number, the FieldView email address is a really great resource to have somebody that's in an office that can answer those questions straight away. We might be out in a cedar cab or something, and that might not be the easiest way to contact us, but yeah, we're always more than happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that concludes our webinar, Jules. So hopefully this was informative for everyone. We will continue to roll out some webinars as we progress through the season. So we'll look at doing one after planting, something that hope maybe to watch in the cab while you're thinking about maybe different ways you might be able to do applications, or some of the tips and tricks, some of the common questions we might do a webinar on. But we'll follow it through the season and make these available through our YouTube and through our email communications as well. So feel free to share it to anyone who you think might use it. Watch it in the cab. Probably the best thing to do, but certainly for this one, getting things set up and ready for this year's season, it'll pay dividends getting this stuff done now and familiarizing yourself now, and certainly you should have a fairly successful year with FieldView.
Thanks, Alex.
We'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.